Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. So election day in New York, New Jersey, Virginia in particular, 8 days away, a week from tomorrow. And Zoran Mamdani took the opportunity to begin his closing argument by, I guess, focusing on his base. If you look at the polling, Mamdani is winning because he's circling the field in New York City when it comes to people not born in this country. He's got like a 30-point lead over Cuomo. When it comes, people not born in this country but eligible to vote, right? So first-generation immigrants. Although, in New York City, who knows? But that's the survey research. And actually, Andrew Cuomo is leading them by 9 points among those who were born in America. And so he is focusing on his first-generation, particularly Muslim base, and the solidarity and marginality play that comes with focusing on a particular minority group that supposedly is representative of other minority groups that are also being treated shabbily, a majority or by some other boogeyman, Trump, the billionaires around Trump. I don't know, Curtis Sliwa. I mean, it's a tough argument to make out, but anyway, they're oppressed by mainly Trump and Republicans, and Cuomo is a false prophet, and so he needs to be discarded because the revolution will run through Mamdani. That's essentially what he argues. And this is rather bold, I thought, remembering 9/11 through the prism of this anecdote about his aunt.
I want to use this moment to speak to the Muslims of New York City.
Very emotional.
I want to speak to the memory of my aunt. Who stopped taking the subway after September 11th because she did not feel safe in her hijab.
Because to be Muslim in New York...
To be Muslim in New York is to expect indignity.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. That is not drawing support from all quarters, as you might imagine, sort of like his doing a photo op with unindicted co-conspirator of the first World Trade Center bombing, who also was a character witness for the mastermind of the first World Trade Center bombing at trial. That's not sitting well with a lot of families who lost loved ones, both in the first World Trade Center bombing, of course, as well as on 9/11. Right. The real tragedy of 9/11 was what was allegedly happened to Mamdani's aunt afterwards. You know what it reminded me of? I know a lot of people are invoking the old Norm Macdonald joke, like if Muslims got nuclear weapons and killed 60 million people, the real tragedy would be the backlash against Muslims after that occurred. That's sort of being resuscitated, a joke that Norm Macdonald, may he rest in peace, made about a decade ago. But it was more reminiscent to me of Scott MacFarlane, who's a CBS News reporter, what he had to say, remember on this Chuck Todd podcast a few months ago, about what happened to him at Butler, Pennsylvania?
For those of us there, it was such a horror because you saw an emerging America. And it wasn't the shooting, Chuck. I got diagnosed with PTSD within 48 hours. I got put on trauma leave. Not because I think of the shooting, but because you saw it in the eyes, the reaction of the people. They were coming for us. If he didn't jump up with his fist, they were going to come kill us.
I know.
Right. Those Trump supporters at Butler, Pennsylvania, were going to execute members of the D.C. press corps if Trump didn't stand up and pump his fist. That's what Scott MacFarlane said, and Chuck Todd said, Yep, I know. That's what would have happened. The real tragedy of the assassination attempt on Trump's life and the murder of that firefighter on that day was how Scott McFarlane felt about it. Right. Could you be any bigger of a navel gazer? Could you be any more tone deaf? No. Will it inhibit Mamdani's chances of closing this out? I tend to doubt it. For more on this and other related matters, John Hinderaker, president of the Center of the American Experiment and contributor to PowerlineBlog.com, joins us. John, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Hey, happy to do it, Dan.
You know, it's almost like these wildly ignorant, intemperate remarks that draw a rebuke, not even just from conservatives, but from like family members of victims. It almost like there's the left just has that immediate backlash to rally around their candidate or issue du jour. That's what I expect is going to happen to Mamdani. I just don't think there's anything that penetrates the base of his support in New York City.
Well, everybody thinks he's going to win, and I don't have any basis to disagree with that. And, you know, people talk a lot about how liberals live in a bubble and so on, and obviously it's true. In other words, they wouldn't say these things if there weren't a lot of people out there to whom they make sense. You know,
right.
Mamdani says, oh, yeah, the real tragedy of 9/11 is that my aunt had to start riding Ubers, I guess, instead of taking the subway. I don't know. And to a normal person, that's crazy. But, you know, he's not stupid. He knows his audience. And obviously there's a lot of people out there who nod along and say, oh, yeah, that's right.
And perspective on the races in Jersey and Virginia as well. I mean, just in terms of what you think the implications will be depending on the outcome in terms of changing any sort of posture either party is taking.
Well, you know, we'll see what happens. I was in D.C. over the weekend, got together with a guy from Virginia who's very knowledgeable about politics there. And of course, what's going on there is that Jay Jones, it got revealed that he was texting about a former speaker, I think, of the legislature there and wanting to execute him with 2 bullets to the head and then urinate on his grave. And he talked about wanting that man's young children, little kids, to die because they were little fascists. I mean, it's really shocking stuff. And it came out at a time when it was probably too late for the Democrats to come up with a new candidate for Attorney General. And so instead of doing that, they've all coalesced behind him. And the candidate for governor, what's her name, Spanberger, a very mediocre candidate, is backing him all the way. And the national Democrats from Virginia are all sticking with him. And it looks like Spanberger is going to win that governor slot. And there's a pretty good chance Jay Jones might even get elected Attorney General over the incumbent, despite those texts and other peccadillos, you know, driving 116 miles an hour, getting stopped, and so on. And I think what's going on there is that Donald Trump is so unpopular in Virginia because there are so many government employees living in Northern Virginia that right now running as a Republican is very, very tough.
And Jersey, it seems like there's more of a shot for Chitterelli, the Republican there. But, you know, you're still up against a lot of inertia that's both anti-Trump and just used to voting for the person with the D next to their name. And even though Mikey Sherrill is similarly mediocre, as you said, of Spanberger, you know, it just for that party, it just doesn't matter. And unless you can turn out all the Trump voters and you know, and a good subset of the independent voters, it's just tough for a Republican in any state that is not substantially red.
Well, we see this in my state of Minnesota. It's one of the problems Republicans have right now. There's a lot of people who are dedicated Trump voters, but are not dedicated Republican Party voters. And so when Trump is on the ballot, they turn out. When Trump is not on the ballot, they may or may not turn out. And that's something we've seen happen here in Minnesota. I think it's happened in other states around the country.
Speaking of your home state of Minnesota there, and Minneapolis in particular, interesting piece by Chris Rufo over at City Journal on George Floyd Square. And and where we are after the quote-unquote revolution of 2020. Where are we with George Floyd Square and the state of affairs in Minneapolis?
Dan, it's a time capsule. And, of course, people in my organization have been writing about this steadily all the way along, and basically nothing has happened since 2020. 5 years have gone by. George Floyd Square looks exactly as it did then. Businesses are dying. Residents have moved out. It's become a haven for drug dealers and drug users. Law enforcement passes by occasionally but tries not to get involved. The whole city of Minneapolis has not rebounded from the riots of 2020. Here's a case you'll appreciate, Dan. Not only is George Floyd Square the same as it was 5 years ago, but the 3rd Precinct Minneapolis Police Department station, which was abandoned on the orders of higher-ups and burned, destroyed by the rioters, it's still sitting there. It's a burned-out hulk 5 years later, and the only change is they've now put up a sign that says future home of the Minneapolis Democracy Center. They're going to have early voting and voter outreach, supposedly, but the building is just a burned-out hulk, and that's kind of symbolic of the entire city of Minneapolis, where downtown is, has not bounced back. The city has not bounced back. Property values have catastrophically declined.
And what happens in your mayor's race with Jacob Fry seeking a 3rd term?
Yeah, so we've got the local version of Mamdani in New York.
Yeah.
A guy named Omar Fateh, currently a Minnesota legislator, running for mayor of Minneapolis. He's a Somali immigrant, extremely left-wing, a self-avowed socialist. And he got the Democratic endorsement for mayor, although I think it was later taken away because of irregularities. I mean, the Democratic Party in Minneapolis sometimes has fistfights breaking out in their caucuses. I mean, it's a wild scene. And so
mostly
Omar
peaceful
Fateh
fistfights, though. Mostly peaceful fistfights.
Yeah, exactly right. And so a lot of people think Omar Fateh is going to win that race, and he may. I always remind people, though, that in 2021, same thing happened. A member of the Democratic Socialists got the Democrat endorsement, but it was Jacob Fry who won the election. And so I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens.
But the point is, does it matter that much whether it's Fry or Fateh?
Well, I mean, it matters. Oh, well, probably not. But it matters to this extent that Jacob Fry is a guy who at least can talk to business people and sound rational. Now, he hasn't been able to do anything to actually bring Minneapolis back from the disasters of 2020. But I do think that if Omar Fateh wins that election, it's going to be another nail in the coffin for the city.
John Hinderaker, president of the Center of the American Experiment, contributor to Powerline, powerlineblog.com. John, thanks as always.
Great to be with you, Dan.
You too, and John joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer. Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Let me take a moment to talk about my friends at QC Kinetics. They're helping so many listeners regain their mobility free from joint pain. Does this sound like you? Where every time you move, it's a reminder of what hurts? A reminder of how far you've drifted from the life you once had? Well, relief is closer than you think, and it doesn't have to come from surgery.